Okay, we're up to 75 people, so probably think we can get started. Oh, 77. The number grows. All right, Wanzi, do you want to kick us off?
Sounds good. Welcome everybody to our webinar, and we are really pleased to get together and share the latest findings from our State of the California ECE workforce. And this covers both the statewide and county data. Uh, we can move on, Anna. And my name is Wanzi Muruvi. I am with my colleague here, Anna Powell. And for those who don't know us, we are from the Center for the Study of Childcare Employment, the national leader in ECE workforce research and policy. You can read more about us if you're interested on our website. We can move to the next one. Oh, that's us looking very, very cute. Next one, Anna. Okay, so this is a very short agenda we have with you today because we hope that once we have given you the teaser with the data, you would want to rush to really dig into what we already have on our website and start engaging with that. So we will share highlights from the new data, and then we will hear from two county leaders on their perspectives, and we are really pleased they could join us today. And then we will also do a little demo on how to access data and also tell you a little bit about how you can do follow-ups in case you are interested to know more.
Okay,
Okay, yeah, Anna.
thanks, Wanzi. Let me tell you a little bit about the data that we'll be discussing. First, this is going to be an updated snapshot on the early care and education workforce and the many settings when they work. This is data, of course, across California, and we last collected this level of statewide, really robust data in 2020. So as you can imagine, a lot has changed since then, and it's really time for us to have fresh perspective on where's the workforce now and the current conditions. Since our 2020 study, for those of you who are familiar with our previous work, we have now added the TK paraprofessionals and started to learn a bit more about this group. So they will be included in the data we're sharing today. And two of our counties, when they completed their survey, actually had sequel modules, which is another type of survey we do to look more in depth at working conditions and environment. So that's just for your knowledge that San Francisco and Alameda counties have done more in-depth work, and you may see that come out at a later date. But we had three big questions as part of this ongoing study. We really first want to know about the composition of the workforce. Who is performing this work? What is it like to be them? What are their compensation, their well-being, their job stability? Next question is really about the site level. We want to understand the stability of the programs, how their staffing and enrollments are going, operations and finances. And then third, we are interested on how early educators are affected by policy changes. And one of the main ways we will look at this is by following on surveys over the next couple of years. And we'll talk a bit more about future data collection as we go. So who is included? We have 6 types of educators that participated in the 2025 California Workforce Study. First, family childcare providers, where we were able to reach out to the full set of large license holders and then small providers in select counties. And that's an area where we plan to do more data collection to expand the number of educators with small licenses, but we were unable to access the full set of contact information. We're working on it. Next, we have our center directors, class administrators, lead teachers, and assistants. So 3 groups of early educators who work in centers. And when we say center-based care, we are including programs operated at or by a school district or a county office. So, for example, a Head Start program that a county facilitates at their local school site would be included in our group of center-based care. Then 2 more groups, of course, TK specific. We have the lead teachers, who are credentialed elementary school teachers, and their paraprofessionals, sometimes known as paras, who serve as the aides in their classroom. The job title sometimes varies, but that's how those folks are grouped. And when we conducted the study, we had materials in 3, sometimes 4 languages to do outreach. That would be English, Spanish, Chinese, and then Arabic in select counties. And we worked with outreach partners to promote this survey and ensure that it had wide response. And you'll see how we did in just a moment, including our friends and allies at the California ECE Workforce Registry, who have done so much to support educators, but also our partners at resource and referral agencies, especially in those 18 counties who work so closely to support folks in their area. And here's how we did. We have 5 analytical regions that we track in California. LA County, being so large, is its own region. All the other regions are grouping of counties that are touching one another. For example, Bay Area or Northern California. And here you'll see that for our total, we had nearly 10,000 educators who participated in this main survey. And the area where we need to do some improvements is to go back to our small SEC population, right? So this is what we plan to do in future surveys to ensure that we beef up that area and make sure we're representing them in full. But in the meantime, I want to make sure to point out that when we have our accounts by region, this size of the population allows us not only to report findings at the state level, but also for these regions. And here's a list of all our counties, how they fit into the regions, in case you were wondering, is the county I represent in the central region or the northern region? And we have stars here to indicate the counties that partnered with us, such that we even have county level data in addition to that region. So here you can see that within the northern region, for example, we had Butte, El Dorado, Humboldt, and Yuba Sutter, who all participated and do have that county level data. The other regions, the other counties within that region are part of the regional estimate, but do not have county level estimates available today. I'm now going to turn to provide some state level findings, and I'll pass back to Wanzi because I've already been talking a lot and let her say more.
Okay, yes, we'll give Anna a breather. And I'll just zoom through this data and you have an opportunity to explore them further on our website. So just look at, so who really are the ECE workforce in California state? So some of their characteristics, we still see that they remain predominantly women across all job roles. Here we have center lead teachers, center assistants, family childcare providers, and the 2 bottom panels are the TK teachers and the TK paras. And as you can see, the characteristics of the TK paras tend to, I'll cover that more, but if you look at their language, for example, spoken, they tend to mirror that of the other educators. We also find that about 1/5 of educators have children under 5 in their household. So a significant proportion of educators are parents as well. We can move to the next one, Anna. This one is showing the educators by race and ethnicity. And we find, again, like I was already touching on this, that especially the childcare workforce, as well as the TK paras, are quite diverse. They bring quite a bit of diversity in there. Predominantly Latina educators, the majority across job roles are Latina. And we also find that we are still finding that the diversity of educators, center-based family childcare providers, tend to mirror that of the children they serve. Less so among TK teachers who are predominantly white, and then the other racial groups constitute a smaller percentage compared to the center teachers and the family childcare providers, as well as the paras. Let's move to the next one. Here we are talking about the educational attainment. We are really pleased to see that the workforce in California is highly educated. The top graph shows job roles, family childcare providers, center teachers, center assistants, TK teachers, and TK paras. And then for each role, we are looking at educators who have high school or less, some college, associate degree, and bachelor's degree. And as you can see, we have about 30% of family childcare providers have bachelor's degrees. Almost 50 have at least an associate. So the proportion of educators in the working with young children, we have very high levels of education. Some college, very few have only a high school degree. The majority have some college or higher. They also bring lots of years of experience. As you can see in the bottom panel, family childcare providers on average have 18 years of experience in ECE, and then followed behind by TK teachers, as well as center lead teachers with 15. And what is interesting to see is that even though TK teachers do bring years of experience to the field, most of that experience is really with working with children that are in the K to third grade, which they are bringing now into TK. So that's an interesting finding. And then we also wanted to understand early educators by country of birth. We always have asked this question. We don't ask about their immigrant status. We just ask whether they were born in the United States or outside of the United States. And as you can see, we have a significant number who are born outside of the country, especially among family childcare providers, where 44% are born in another country that is not the United States. And about a fifth of other educator groups are born outside of the United States. So that's an interesting finding, especially in the current context. The next one, Anna. Of course, wages are always interesting, and I think I won't go into details with this one because you can see for yourself. Again, we have the teacher, the educator roles, and then we show the bars showing their income, median annual wages. The story is still the same. Center educators and paraprofessionals are still earning about half of what TK teachers are earning. And we'll move to the next one, Anna.
I'll just briefly explain
Yes.
why we have a range for family childcare. I know it says it here on the slide, but I think it's just helpful to mention. So, family childcare providers are typically, right, self-employed small business owners. And so they may think different ways about how to measure their income. Some people may, in fact, have a salary budgeted for themselves, and others think of it as whatever's left at the end of the month. So, because of that, we have to sort of ask more broadly about the earnings in the program and try to estimate a range that we think the earnings are falling in. So, as you see here for family child care providers, we're reporting that the large license holders, we think the earnings fall somewhere between 52,000 and 65,000. And as a reminder, we don't have the small FCCs reported here because we feel we need to survey more of them to reach a representative group across the state, not just those in the oversample counties. So stay tuned. We hope to come back to you with strong data on that group at a later date. All right, back
Thank
to
you.
you, Wanzi.
Okay, thank you for that detailed explanation, Anna. And then this one, we are now delving into the educator economic well-being. How are educators doing? So what I have are 5 panels. The first one shows enrollment in health insurance. The second one is in retirement savings, whether educators have retirement savings. And then we have food sufficiency, whether they have enough of the type of food they like to eat. And then at the bottom, we have enrollment in public assistance, a very important indicator of financial well-being, as well as home ownership. And as you can see, like if you focus on the orange bar there, those are TK teachers. Now, TK teachers, because they work in public schools, they tend to have compensation and benefits, like benefits such as healthcare, insurance, availability of retirement, pension plans tend to be typical for them. They tend to get that. So as you can see, they do outperform other educators in most of the categories. And we also see that they are the least likely to enroll in public assistance at 11% compared to like 40% for the other educators. And another important point to probably draw attention to is even though family childcare providers are the least likely to have retirement savings, this is an improvement from our previous, the 2020 study, and we are really excited to see that. And again, looking at the policy field, how it has shifted, we know there was that a retirement savings plan that was a big win for CCPU. And so the percentages climbed, I think it's from 20%, right, Anna, 2025 to now 27%. So small steps in the right direction. The next one, Anna. Oh, this one is exciting. So in our survey, we asked educators, what are their plans? Where do they see themselves in 3 years' time? So here again, I have the educators on the TK teachers, family childcare providers, paras, center lead teachers, and center assistants. And then we can see that the majority of TK teachers and family childcare providers say, oh, I'm likely to continue in the same role. What is interesting though is that if you look at the orange bar, for TK paras, center lead teachers, and center assistants, even though few of them are saying, I'm going to continue in the same role, we find that a significant number are moving to a different job, but they will still be in ECE. So we do see that movement, either maybe looking for advancement, job advancement, looking for better opportunities, maybe in terms of looking for settings that have better wages. So we do see this a lot. And it is interesting to see that when you look at the full bar, educators are not really leaving the field in droves, but they are likely to be changing jobs. So that's something we thought is interesting to highlight. Let's see the next one. Yes, I will move it over back to Anna.
Thank you, Wanzi. Okay, we are almost done looking at data together, and then we can talk about what's next. I wanted to share a bit about staffing levels and turnover, since we know this is very important to everyone's thinking. And for those of you who do advocacy, it's good to know. So what I'm showing you here are child care center staffing levels. We know many family child care providers work alone or in a family team, and it is the case that some employ assistants, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So looking at the child care centers, recalling that we have those 5 regions, I'm showing you here the turnover rates and the number of people who are employed in each of these types of jobs and centers by region. So for California as a whole, we see there are 73,000-ish lead teachers, we estimate, and another 36,000 assistants. So as you can tell, that means that some centers may not all employ assistants. Sometimes they have small rooms or they have teams of lead teachers, as the case may be. So different staffing models. But we estimate that of the lead teacher pool, there's approximately 22% turnover of the jobs in this sector. So, right, some of these people moving to other roles within the space, but from the reports of each site director, we know this many of the positions turned over. And meanwhile, 26% of the assistant teachers. So we've highlighted in red the highest level by job category, and we can see for the lead assistant, the northern part of the state, right, which be above Sacramento, above the Bay Area, had the highest lead teacher turnover, though only small differences by percent, and also the highest of assistant, and that is a bit more pronounced with a 34% turnover rate. Meanwhile, Central California, for example, the area that would include Fresno counties and the Central Valley more generally, as well as Central Coast, did slightly edge out with lower lead teacher turnover at 19%. And then LA did come in slightly below for the assistants at 19% turnover. Now, this is pretty high level, so let's talk about Title 22 versus the contractor universe of Head Start Title 5, because we have seen that there are some differences. And when I'm talking about Title 22, right, this by using this term, I mean the type of centers that are subject to basic health and safety regulations. So that would include centers that have no private funding, or sorry, only private funding, no public funding, or they may have children who have a child care subsidy, such as alternative payment, but they're not receiving funding that would come with Title V requirements, like state preschool, okay? So with that, let's now look at just lead teachers. As you recall, we had on the previous slide that lead teachers are 22% overall. Well, when we look at the Title 22 universe, it's a little bit higher 24% in statewide, versus in the Head Start Title V, state preschool, etc. universe, it's a little lower at 19%. So when we zoom in on this Title 22 universe, we see that once again, the northern part of the state has highest turnover at 29% of their lead teachers. At the other end, southern doing slightly better, 22% turnover. But in the Head Start Title V universe, we actually saw quite a bit of turnover in Head Start Title V in the southern part of the state, but much lower in other areas, such as the Bay Area only had 13%. And we know that there were policies such as Hold Harmless that helped to stabilize funding for programs like this during the pandemic. So these are where we see the effects of that coming to play. Now, here's the same information, just talking about assistant teachers, right? And this is where you're going to see the highest levels of turnover within a group. We already saw from the first slide that that was the case. But now when we talk about assistant teachers working in those Title 22 centers, right, whether privately funded or with some or all subsidy, this is where we're going to see much higher rates of turnover overall, with up to 39% in the northern region. Now, there is an asterisk on here because this is based off the report of 49 different directors, program directors. So it could be that maybe our sample is a little small, so we don't want to get too carried away. But it's still important to note that this is suggesting real high levels of turnover in that area and that type of program. On the other end, LA, the Title 22 did a bit better for their assistant teacher at only 20% turnover. But then now talking about Head Start Title V, while once again we see the turnover rates are a little bit lower on the whole, we still find that in the northern region, 30% turnover of assistants. That's really tough, almost a third of your staff coming and going each year. And then similar to with the lead teachers, the Bay Area had the lowest levels of turnover, only 12%. So this just goes to show that there's vast differences of how turnover and staffing looks across the state, not just by the region, but also based on the type of program that they're operating. So that concludes the data that we were going to share with you today. We will be putting links in the chat that will take you to the webpage where all of the visuals that Wanzi shared, you can find them in their interactive, scroll over, click on them, download them, etc. And then we will also share where you can find all the tables, and we'll actually talk a bit more about how to access the wealth of tables that we have. But before we do that, we wanted to pause and invite two county level leaders to talk about the ways in which workforce data are part of how they approach their local coordination and planning. And first, we have Des Martinez from San Diego County Office of Education. Thank you, Des.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon now. I'm Des Martinez. I'm from the San Diego County Office of Education, and I am a Child Care and Development Local Planning Council Coordinator, or LPC Coordinator for San Diego County. I also serve as the co-chair of the California LPC Coordinators Association. So I'm excited to talk with you all today about how we're using workforce data and all kinds of data, really. I'm not talking with you about a technical exercise here. I'm really talking about truly how we're using this data on the ground for community building, for planning. A big part of LPC is data gathering and the use of data for moving work forward in early learning and care. So in San Diego County, we are very fortunate to have strong community partners. We work closely with our First Five, with our Resource and Referral Agency, YMCA Child Care Resource Service, the San Diego Foundation, Children's First Collective, and more. This partnership that we have with our community partners, that's really what gave us the ability to pull together workforce data together with UC Berkeley. And the great part is that this data is giving us a true reflection of the diversity within our county. Our county is pretty big. It has dense urban areas, and then it has really rural, isolated areas. So there's parts of the county that looks pretty different. And UC Berkeley was able to capture the differences throughout our county. So I do want to share that the data is central to some of the work we've done within our county. We have a child care blueprint that supports the priorities that we're moving forward with in terms of early learning and care. We're in the process of pulling together our LPC needs assessment. We are working on implementation planning for countywide strategies. So we rely on workforce data and data as a whole for understanding our gaps, aligning agencies around shared priorities, shaping the work that ranges from direct provider supports to long-term policy and funding strategies, including potential policy and ballot initiative conversations that we've been having for a couple of years now. So there's a lot that data supports us in within our county and community. And it's important that we have credible, consistent data. It helps us move beyond anecdotal stories that we hear within the community. Certainly, those are very important, but having that clear, crisp data, valid, reliable data, it strengthens our advocacy. It gives us common language when we're bringing partners together who don't fully understand early childhood education, or maybe who don't have the same or shared perspectives that we have. That specific data is helpful. It's vital. It's necessary. At the same time, I do want to share that there's real challenges when it comes to workforce data, gathering the data. It's expensive and it's time consuming. The landscape keeps shifting. There's closures within programs. You all know this. There's staffing turnover, which Anna and Wanzi just talked about, up to 30% turnover. That's huge. And with TK expansion, our landscape is changing. Without ongoing funding, the data becomes outdated fast, and it's difficult to keep up current data. So it's important that we continue to come together collectively with our community partners to ensure that we maintain this valid, reliable, consistent data for advocacy, for understanding what's going on in our field. And not all data is created equal. It's important that we use consistent, valid, reliable data. We have to be careful about how our data is interpreted, how it's used. I hate to say it, but data could be misused or misinterpreted. It could even be, unfortunately, weaponized in a competitive funding environment that we happen to be in right now. So it is important that we come together with shared understanding and shared goals and share our data with one another so that we all understand what's happening within our community. I am starting to see the biggest impact when connecting data with policy and economic development. There's a learning curve for me when it comes to this because I come from early childhood education. I mean, I was in the classroom. I was a toddler teacher. So this is new for me. And I'm starting to build a message about how childcare is economic infrastructure. And obviously, we can use data to make that case. Whether we're talking to providers, funders, county leaders, legislative staff who look at childcare through that fiscal or workforce lens rather than a program lens, I think it's important for us to head in that direction, and we need to use this workforce data to help us build that message and continue to advocate for funding. Ultimately, I think the bottom line here is whether urban or rural, big or small, we're all dealing with the same challenges. But when we have trusted data, we can build stronger communities, coalitions, create more alignment together with our strategies, make a case for the resources that our communities really need. So these are the ways that San Diego County has used data. These are the ways LPC within my community is continuing to use data. I'll pause there, see if there are any questions. And if not, I'll turn it over to, is it Kerry? over at Humboldt.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Des, for giving a county leadership perspective on the importance of using data, but also the challenges in doing so. And we welcome you to put questions in the Q&A, but after Kerry's remarks, we will also have a chance to talk more generally and answer any questions you may have. So I'll go ahead and invite Kerry to speak now. Thank you, Des.
Thanks, Des, and thank you, team, for this, and thank you for having us. So just as a point of reference, what's really fun about Des and I is that we actually are on the opposite sides of the state. For those who may not be as familiar with Humboldt, we are up north, except for our neighbors to the north in Del Norte. We are almost as far north as you can get with the redwoods. And for population size, we would be considered a rural, if not remote region by the state of California. So roughly we have the same square miles as LA. But LA has 9.7 million people and we have 135,000 people within our square mile footage. So, but it just drives home so many of the things that Des said. So much of what we do needs to be backed up with accurate data, reliable data, and current data. And I think to build off of a few things that Des highlighted, we have to have an ongoing way to do this. I think some of the things that are very challenging is that good data and consistent data takes funding and it takes investment. It's worth the investment because the decision making that's based on accurate data, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and periodic data that is continuous and contiguous across periods of time means that we are making some solid decisions based on an accurate or more accurate picture than when it's sort of stopgap and in between. Like we could do it every 5 years, we could do it every 3 years. But what becomes a problem is when there isn't any support for data gathering as a piece of good, solid decision making, both at local and broader levels, state and federal levels, is that you're working off of data that may be so far outdated, or there may be money released and all of a sudden you are gathering data in many places, but maybe not with the same techniques or the same tools. So I think it's that staying consistent, staying reliable, and making sure that all the representation happens. As you saw, we have a lot of the same kinds of data, things show up in the data in the urban areas as well as the southern areas and the northern areas. But our area definitely returned higher turnovers and a little bit more of a pronounced data footprint of the kinds of changes in volatility. And there may be many reasons for that. And I really want to recognize and thank the group of collaboration that we have here in Humboldt. That includes our County Office of Ed. In fact, the UPK dollars that were released by the state are what enabled us to actually use the funding for data to get an accurate picture. So that's really appreciated. Our First Five is involved. We all work together on this child care issue, and we're always constantly and consistently finding ways to figure out how to gather data. There's also the piece of, as Des mentioned, there's a broader context here. And we're actually very fortunate in California that childcare has more or less been regarded as an important economic driver, but we saw that in COVID. We saw it impact the ability for people to go to work. It's like we were learning this all over again. You need childcare because without childcare, you lose major portions of your workforce. And we know that businesses rely on that, whether they're large businesses or they're small businesses. In fact, within the state blueprint for economic development with California Jobs First, childcare is regarded as a primary underlying support that enables and drives economic development. And many of the regional coalitions with that have also put a spotlight on childcare. Where consistent data and apples to apples become super important is as each group looks at things like this currently, they may be looking at slightly different data or reports and may in fact be unaware of each other's reporting or priority systems. Data is a tool that allows us to have a snapshot, but the actual implications of data, understanding what is happening. And I saw some questions in the QA. This seems to be a pronounced trend. Like, for example, our turnover in Title 22 centers, right? It's 1/3. That's a very large amount for a center to manage with training and hiring and classrooms and ratios. It makes it extremely challenging. So this is a trend we can notice, but then what is behind that trend? Why is that trend happening? And then from there, what are the solutions, the possible steps we can take to address that and manage that particular trend? So data is more than just what do you see reflected in the picture? It's also what comes next. How do you use it in a responsive and responsible way? Also, Des, I want to just again validate, and I was doing like an off-camera sort of like, yes, when you raise the issue that unfortunately data can be misused to show things or interpret things that are maybe not the reality. In a rural system, more than 50, 60% actually is a much closer ratio of the child care up here comes from family, friend, and neighbor who are non-licensed caregivers. How are we capturing that particular window of it? And the further out you get in the rural areas, and I suspect this is the same down south too, in San Diego and parts of San Bernardino that go into much more rural areas, the licensed centers become far fewer and the reliance on family, friends, and neighbors becomes much higher. We have many tribal communities up here that we partner with and work with and also run their own centers and do their own funding streams for voucher-based childcare. But the options for that are also extremely limited when it comes to licensed capacity. Does that mean that we have a childcare desert? Yes, but also that is a data point that needs to be explored because what childcare desert might mean in the Bay Area may be very different than what it looks like in a tribal community. And how are we ensuring that quality happens when centers are not actually the option that is the most available? There are many possibilities, there are many policy implications. So the conversations that come next off of this amazing report that was a statewide report and then a deep dive into some of our areas, that's the conversation that data helps get us to. And what I'm really hopeful is we will be having both the local level conversations. Many of us are figuring out like the wonderful blueprint you all have down there that you've worked very hard and the initiative for stabilization of childcare that we have worked on up here as a coalition with our county, because we're also looking at local funding solutions. And I think many of us across the state of California are trying to figure out what our data says and how to make those gaps, narrow the gaps, increase the capacity, and also support the well-being of childcare providers in general and taking those next steps. But there's a broader conversation too that we hope for not only regionally, but also statewide, which is what is that driver of conversation that we can use this data for so that when we have state legislators discussing childcare and looking at it, we can go to them and say, not only do we have statewide data, but take a look at these 18 counties that there's a deep dive into. They're diverse and very important representation across our state. And let's think about when you're developing solutions at a legislative level, what does this represent? What do these things mean? Are there slightly different solutions for San Diego than there might be for Humboldt County? Are there different things in the Bay Area that may or may not fit in the Sacramento area, in the Central Valley? There's a lot of things for us to think about with this data, and I appreciate the fact that we have the broad picture and then the deeper dives. So, Anne, I love data. I need to hand back to you. I apologize. I get very excited.
Thank you, Kerry. And by the way, I should mention that her leadership role comes from resource and referral in case that wasn't clear. We also invited these two individuals to talk about different lens on the ECE system and how they would interact with data in their capacity. So hopefully that helped kind of give you some food for thought of how to approach this data or talk about it with your local coalitions, because we hope that this is useful to you. We want it to be useful to you. And if it's not, please tell us what's missing and what we could be looking at. So we'll be having a Q&A in a moment, but first we wanted to just make sure you know how to go and pull data from this resource. And so I will share my screen again, and Wanzi, I'll start us off on how to do that. So we have already dropped the link, but I'll put it again right now. This is the landing page for where you can find the state, regional, and county data that's available. And we have the same types of information for all those levels of geography. So first, this explains which regions, how we build those regions once again. And it also, as you scroll down, identifies a select county. So you can find both based on the map and the list where there is county level data available. And what happens, like let's go into the Monterey County profile. Each of those counties will have its own landing page that you can circulate amongst the folks in your local coalition, or you can download this PDF. Each PDF for the county covers 15 charts that encompasses workforce characteristics, staffing levels, and other essentials. And this could be printed out and shared, but it is still quite a lot of information because you'll notice that we always provide regional comparison and statewide comparison side by side. That way, when your legislators, your local electeds ask you, how does Monterey County compare? You can begin to try to point to some of the broader conditions using the same information there. So for example, here, this is a chart on staffing, and it's once again splitting out findings for Title 22 centers, differentiated from Head Start Title 5, but we also have just centers as a whole in case that's what you're looking for. I do want to mention that going back to the overall statewide profile, when Wanzi was providing the charts for you to look at our conditions, you'll see that TK teachers and paraprofessionals were included. Because those were smaller samples, they're only available at the state and regional level. And here, when you're on the statewide page and you go to the PDF, you will see that those individuals are included. So we have the same charts as was in the county profiles, but now we have more information. So for example, once I get to demographics, race and ethnicity, we still begin with family child care, and then we have all of our center groups, directors, teachers, assistants, but you'll also find information for all 5 regions and the state on TK teachers and their paraprofessionals. So this is our attempt to give you all of the essentials in one place. And it makes for a very dense set of resources. So we just want to say, if you're looking for certain data points and you're struggling to find them, just ask us. We're happy to point you to the exact right page number where you can find the piece that you're looking for. I'll now just ask Wanzi, did you have anything else to share about how best to use this interactive resource?
I think you covered it all, Anna. And any difficulties or challenges, just let us know, and we will be very happy to help you along.
Okay, great. I'll go back to our slideshow briefly. Well, actually, let's just pause before we do the kind of what's next and check. Folks have been asking questions in the Q&A, and I believe we have answered some, but I'll go ahead and invite folks to continue to ask them now, and we'll try to answer a few of them live. So I see a question from Mara, reflecting on the process/methodology. What are our takeaways about running a successful study? Wow, this is a great question. In our work, we try to really go for a representative picture of early care and education in California. That means geographically, as well as different types of programs. So with that, it means that we have to have access to strong lists of sites, educators, etc. And as we kind of mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, our friends at the our friends at the California ECE Workforce Registry have lost their funding. And so that's an example of a backbone entity that would help collect this type of information being compromised and no longer able to fulfill a role as connecting to the ecosystem across California. Now, to be clear, they were never adequately funded to fill the role that a robust registry can do, that other states have funded their registry to do, where everyone who works in ECE could be supported. But even so, that's a real loss that only some counties that are individually funding will be able to continue to tap that. So what did we do instead, right? We really had to partner with community care licensing, with resource and referral agencies, et cetera, to cobble together different ways of connecting to people. And that's what helped us to reach this high level of about 10,000 educators participating. Obviously, there are hundreds of thousands of people who participate in being early educators, but we typically, when you do a survey, you don't need to reach all 100,000 to get really strong data. But what made it successful, I think, is really having those partnerships and ensuring that the way that we are working with local entities feels collaborative. And finally, language inclusion. We have increased the number of languages that we offer our survey in over time. So in 2020, it was available only in 2 languages, English and Spanish. So that's another way that recognizing how diverse California is has been important for us to add more languages. All right, somebody asked about how did we create these partnerships. So we sent out a broad announcement to county offices, First Five, resource and referrals, and other key partners locally to let them know we're going to be gathering data. That way, if people are interested in joining, there's kind of a window for us to sync up and plan together for how to be successful in pushing out the survey during the period in time. So probably we did reach someone in your county, and maybe we didn't reach them at a time where they could respond to us or get back to us. But if we're able to do this again, we'll absolutely shout it from the rooftops and try to let you know. I see we have a question now about what do we hope the California legislator could understand from this as they discuss rate reform, access, etc. Thank you for that question. I would say first, the information we have in here on staffing levels and wages are important to show the way in which this is a very complex and struggling sector, right? Having 20 or 30% turnover tells us that we cannot merely just say, let's have more childcare, snap our fingers, provide a few more slots, and solve the childcare affordability and access crisis. There are structural issues with our childcare ecosystem that require resource and attention. So in the case of rate reform, it will matter a lot if the rates are actually going to improve wages. If they don't, if they continue the status quo of what educators are earning, we can expect high turnover to continue because our data shows us that those are very closely linked. And then additionally, we had in one of our slides, you saw use of public assistance programs, safety net. This is telling us many educators are using Medi-Cal, are using CalFresh, etc. Those are federal programs originally that the state stewards, right? And they are absolutely part of what makes early educators able to afford this career. So if those are being challenged or undermined in this context, that could further make it harder for people to stay in the field. So we know that legislators are thinking about the social safety net right now, but we want to make sure that they know that the consequence of low wages is that many early educators, right, 40 to 50% are using one or more of those benefits. And if those were to be compromised, that would be not only harmful for them as individuals, but also potentially for the pool of folks who do this work. All right. Continue to put any last questions, and then we're going to quickly switch over, and I will allow or ask my colleague Wanzi, she's my work wife. I don't allow her to do anything, to talk about what we hope to do next.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So we are concluding the 2025 study, and we are already looking up to 2026. So we are planning to do a follow-up in spring 2026. We are really excited that this offers us an opportunity to track things as they are happening. As you can tell, there is a lot of changes coming up. So we want to continue tracking staffing, enrollment levels, compensation, well-being, issues around professional learning, job changes and exits, and topical issues, especially related to immigration. And we are very happy for you to reach out to us if there are topics that you think this is something really important that we might have not considered. Please share with us, and we will see how, our survey, we wish we could allow it to be as big as it can be, but we try to accommodate it and still be able to gather information that is helpful. And hopefully, we're also still thinking about the small FCC sample. Remember, we were not able to reach enough, so we are still trying to consider that. And we are also thinking around another group that hasn't been part of our study sample, family childcare provider aides. We know that especially those with licenses to look after more children tend to work with an assistant. So we also want to understand that group of educators, as well as TK principals. They are really important part of the full ECE ecosystem that so far we haven't heard from them. We tend to talk to the TK teachers themselves, and we would really be interested. And coming January, if you have data needs, we are going to develop a system or a way so that at least you can reach out to us maybe with that data request. I think there was a form that we used before, but we would address that. And then, like I said, if you have burning questions that you think you really, really want us to follow up on, we are planning to continue this phase of the 20 that we started in 2025, because as you can tell, we have like 10,000 educators. We want to continue learning more from that pool as we go for hopefully for the next 5 years, funding permitting. So let us know what you need, and I think we can move to the next one, Anna. Oh yes, yeah. So we are hiring. We need a leader to keep us in check. So we are hiring our executive director. If you have a chance, find that link. And if you're interested to come and be part of the CSCCE family, please, we would be so pleased to have you with us. Yeah, and continue sending us questions, even if we didn't manage maybe to get to all of your questions, or if something comes up as you explore our data, those are our contact information. Let us know what you think.
Thank you so much. Yes, on the executive director, we just wanted to mention that this position is remote first. And so thank you, Penelope has just posted the link. We are allowed to consider candidates across California. You don't have to live in Berkeley to be eligible for this position, though there would be, of course, some expectation that you come to campus from time to time. But please don't think of that as a limitation. If you're interested and you are a strong people manager, fundraiser, things like that, we want to hear from you. So please think about putting in an application. And here are emails. We look forward to having follow-ups with anybody who wants to share the data that you wish you had. Or like I said, if you want help navigating the piles of data we have just put out, we're here for you. We're here to come to your, county meetings and give the high-level facts, or to help orient you to the things that you need for your local planning. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for Des and Kerry for being leaders in this field and joining us to talk about data today. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Webinar over. Wanzi, you could stop the clock. Goodbye, friends. Let's